That's a wrap. I mean, that's the start. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite a wrap yet.
What are we knowing of your location these days, or is it unknown?
No, it can be known now. I'm in Mallorca, Spain.
Ah, nice.
Which is an island off the southern side of Spain.
That don't sound half bad.
No, it's pretty dang nice. I mean, it's about a third the size of Puerto Rico, Pete.
Uh-huh.
And yet it's got about 1 million people and a lot of great beaches and coves. And we were out on the water all day today.
What kind of weather you got there? What time is it there?
Let's see. Here it is, 7:01.
Any cocktails in you, or are we going to be smooth, or how?
We had some when we were on the boat.
Don't answer that. I'm just kidding.
We'll have more in a few minutes.
I'm sure of that.
Welcome, though, folks. You are tuned in to The Rebel's Edge. He's Pete Najarian. I'm John Najarian. As Pete said, I'm broadcasting from overseas, but we have a good internet connection, so everything's good. Jared is handling the Dancing Bears, and in this case, anyway, I'm not referring to Jim Cramer. There he is. I don't know if Cramer can dance that well.
He definitely cannot. I'll lock that in right now.
All right. Well, folks, of course, we're looking at a week that should have some market moving information later in the week. The market is moving. All three indices just broke in the last, I'd say, Pete, 10, 15 minutes. Broke the positive because they were all positive. S&P, NASDAQ, Dow were all positive. Right now, the NASDAQ's down 50, Dow's down 150, S&P's down 24. So, and the Russell's down as well, but we rarely quote that one. So anyway, pretty interesting, Pete.
Yeah, we got ourselves an interesting deal going on right now. From the macro minute perspective.
By the way, I was kidding about the market being down.
I was just going to
say if Pete was listening to me or not.
Well, I was listening, but I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I was like, oh, I guess I got to roll with that one there.
Yeah. S&P 500, 30 points higher, folks. The Dow was up 350, I think, when we started the broadcast, and NASDAQ up 34. So the NASDAQ's kind of the laggard of these three, and I'm guessing that you're going to understand why when we get into the macro minute and so forth, which we're in right now. Yeah. We're holding over 4 for the 5th straight day, Pete. So that's why I think we're seeing the markets softer, but not down for the NASDAQ.
Right. And I think the reason that we're seeing these markets rally the way they are today, John, you were talking about the Dow itself, and I didn't know if you had a bad signal or but reality is this, market is screwing to the upside, particularly with the Dow itself. So why is that? Well, I'm going to throw the macro side of this. How about Berkshire Hathaway? Does anything, I mean, they absolutely crushed it. They continue to add in the cash perspective, John. Their cash went up. I think it's 150 billion or something like that in cash. Their numbers looked great. And I think, you know, when we talk about Buffett, we talk about investments that are oftentimes in big macro type companies or whatever. And so obviously they've been doing very, very well. And I think that right now the Oracle is probably smiling pretty big, except for Apple. Other than that, I think the smiles are big.
Yeah, and I'm not so concerned about Apple. I doubt if you are either, Pete, but we'll get into the stocks in just a moment, folks. Let me throw it to Fantastic Futures.
Fantastic Futures.
So my fantastic future today, Pete, is going to be Bitcoin itself, which has not been performing as of late. It has really struggled to maintain 29,000 to the US dollar. And in fact, we've slipped under that today by about $100. We're at 28,900. And I'm going to say, Pete, that that's part of the reason that our Coinbase trade worked out so well, because people just aren't trading as much right now. So even though Brian Armstrong did a great job trying to guide the company through a difficult time, it's just not happening as far as revenue from trading over at Coinbase.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And you guys were on that. I'll tell you what, the unusual option activity was a huge, huge winner there on the way up and on this way back down, John. And huge put buying at the right time. And the stock had dropped from the plus 100, 104 or something like that, all the way down into the 80s. And they were buying those 80 puts. I'm going to give you a real quickie, John, as far as fantastic futures. It's just energy. I mean, you look at nat gas up 6% today. Yes, oil is still holding over 82. It's down a little bit. It was up to 82.60 on Friday. It's pulled back a little bit, but I like what we're seeing from energy. If you're an energy bull, and it's that 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it continues each and every day. And nat gas is on board with crude oil right now.
Yep, it's I mentioned that to I think David Asman, who was sitting in for Kudlow on Friday, Pete. You were doing the lovely Liz Clayman's show, and I was doing Kudlow the hour after you. And I think it was, that we're going to see higher rates, and we're going to see higher rates because of energy prices, and that's a significant input into almost everything.
Yep.
All right, let's dive into Pete Tyson. It's not just chicken. Of course, it's pork and a whole bunch of other meats and so forth. But I'll tell you what it is. They are not making as much money as they were expected to make. Tyson right now, TSN, down 6%. The CEO was saying, Pete, that they're going to have to close more chicken processing plants, and they're going to, quote, continue to evaluate options. I'm not so sure what that means. I remember when this one was just flying high. But right now, just like chickens, it's not really flying at all.
Well, as you mentioned, down 6% now. It's been down more than that, John. It was actually all the way down, not far off the 52-week lows of 47. It hit 50 today, bounced off that, got back up towards 52, 53 last I looked, but they just missed on everything. I mean, you look at the sales, they declined year over year. You look at the earnings numbers, I mean, they're not even close. They had 15 cents. They're looking for 26. That's not a very good thing. You look at revenue, 13.14 billion versus the 13.59 billion. Just across the board, John, they just did not have it. And they had a lot of different things. You were talking about what they were talking about, the processing companies. They are in the process of moving things too. They talked about being maybe having to shift from Arkansas to somewhere else. I mean, there's a whole lot of storylines going on in this one. So I don't know that this is one that you want to suddenly say, this is the bottom and I want to get there. I would be watching this one closely for a while before starting to think I'm buying the bottom.
I think that's prudent advice because when the CEO sounds confused, and this CEO sounded confused, or at least it didn't sound like he didn't understand his own business, Pete. It did not sound like that. So I'm not trying to get that message across. I'm just saying that it seems like they're struggling to find a way to make more money. And some of it is going to be absorbing the costs of moving some of those plants, which is going to be expensive.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Tesla. It's down today. Chief financial officer stepping down. But I'm going to say, Pete, it's really all about this. Musk said that I think he said this in a tweet, but he said he's getting an MRI of his neck and upper back tomorrow. And people got a little nervous about that because, of course, he's viewed as pretty much a genius. And they don't like the idea that maybe that genius might be out of commission for a while.
Yeah. A genius, a savant, you've got all these things, and a guy, and we're going to talk about this later on, and a guy that at some point in time might want to get into the ring with his adversary, Zuckerberg. So we'll talk about that later on. I cannot wait. Let me tell you something. The money's burning a hole in my pocket to see that one. That's going to be great. When you do lose a CFO, John, that has done what this guy has accomplished, now, maybe it's because it was a maturing company or whatever you want to say about Tesla, but he's been in this position now for the last, I believe, 4 years as the CFO. They started getting their free cash flow that started ramping up about 4 years ago. Now, maybe it was because the company was ready, or maybe this guy is that good. Either way, he's walking away. And when I say walking away, it sounded like he was just getting up and gone. Then all of a sudden, I read a little bit deeper, John. It sounds like he's willing to be there through the rest of the year for the transition and all the rest of that. I think that's going to be a good thing as well. So I think you're very much right when you say, you know what, this could be more about Elon than it is the CFO. But nonetheless, this is a CFO who had great success for Tesla. And anytime you've got somebody like that leaving, and it's not like he's 70 years old, John. The guy's 37 and he's walking away. He's been there 10 years. Now, maybe he just decided he had the money that he wanted and he's all good. I don't know, but it's very unusual to see somebody leaving right there in that stage of their life. That's kind of a strange thing. So either way, I think you've got a couple of reasons to see why Tesla's probably down 3-4% today.
Yep. And maybe the fact that Lucid's cutting some prices too. Yeah. Lucid, of course, I think is one of the only real competitors to Tesla with the pure EVs that they have, Pete. As far as, Volkswagen's got the ID4 and all that kind of stuff. But Lucid's got a really cool looking car, which is one of the things that Tesla sort of hung its hat on. And they just cut the prices $5,000 across the board over at Lucid.
I'll tell you real quick, John, that car is badass. It is. I've seen it. I'll tell you what, that thing is, as an EV and everything else, I mean, it looks like something out of, I don't know what, but it's absolutely beautiful. I rode by one the other day. I was like, whoa, it is gorgeous.
Like the future, Pete.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Apple down 2% today. Obviously a little weak since the earnings were last week and they were not spectacular. They weren't really called to be spectacular last week. And they'll be making an announcement probably in the next couple weeks, Pete, about their debut of their newest phone, whether they call it the iPhone 15 or whatever. But I think this is just kind of a middling period for Apple between the earnings and that new announcement, which is always like the second or third week in September that they say, hey, we're going to have a special grand surprise for you in Cupertino. Yeah. But anyway, I think what we're also looking at is the NASDAQ is reporting that they're hiring a whole bunch of folks all over the world, Pete, in what's known as large language models. And they're saying this is something that could be transforming the company. I think that's not why it's down. I'm just saying that there's a lot of weird news that people are trying to piece together over at Apple right now.
Well, one of the weird news things is that they missed on those iPhone numbers, John, and that was something that people were not happy about. And here's why. The stock just a couple weeks ago hit up at 198, all-time highs. And when you're up there at those lofty levels and you've got a 30 PE for a company that oftentimes is a lot closer to a 20 PE, that gets people a little nervous and they're ready to say sold a lot faster than they are saying, hey, look, buy them. And I think that's what we saw because the charts were telling us on a good number, that was going to 206. On a bad number, this thing could approach towards 180. Here we are. And actually even a little bit below that. I think I saw 178 not too terribly long ago. But when your revenues are also pulling back and you've got issues with the Mac and the iPad and some of that, John, they're not very strong. There are some issues. Now, that all being said, services were great. They get a lot of different types of margin there. That was outstanding. Those numbers were very impressive. But, this is a big, bad behemoth. But there are times where it's, maybe better off that you just kind of lay off, wait, and look for the opportunities that are out there. I think this is one of those times. I don't know that necessarily we've hit the low because we cracked through that 180 level, which I think a lot of chart folks were looking at. So this might be down here for a little bit, John, and it certainly is pulling on the markets.
Yeah, it's another reason the NASDAQ's a little soft because the biggest stock in the world. All right, let's talk about DaVita, Pete. I know you and I know a thing or two. You're far more expert than me about dialysis and so forth, but kidney dialysis, folks, is something that you go through if your kidneys aren't working correctly. And a machine basically has to help clean what your kidneys do for you if you're somebody that needs that. And DaVita operates those kinds of clinics where you go in there and you do that. UBS just raised them to a buy, DVA to a buy, and that's why we're seeing, and it was a pretty big raise too, Pete. They put the price target up at 142 from 100, so that's a pretty big jump.
And this is a stock that just hit 52-week highs that was just about, call it 117. So yeah, you're right. I mean, that is a monstrous move, but it all makes sense. It's a very inexpensive stock. They're doing everything right. When you look at the earnings up 31%, that's impressive. Revenue wasn't even up all that much. So it shows you the efficiencies that they are hitting right now across the board, John. Their profits were up a little over 3% as well, but it was the guidance. And when you and I talk about this all the time, it's great to look at what happened this last quarter, and then you still have to transition and say, all right, how about what are you going to do for me now? What have you done for me lately? What are you going to do for me now? And that's the position they're in, and their guidance was outstanding as well. So this is a stock, even though it's hitting 52-week highs today, I still think it's cheap. I think this is one of those names that could continue on. I'm not sure about 140 or when it might get to 140, but I think it is a name that absolutely has a little bit more room to the upside.
Well, again, it's not really the sort of procedure you can put off.
No.
If you need, it's death is on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So you're either getting a new kidney from a cadaver or a family member. Those are the two most prominent ways it comes. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it could be from a friend, like I think Selena Gomez, Pete, got it from a friend, mm-hmm. got her kidney from a friend. But you got to get the blood cleaned out, and that's what your kidney's function is. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to do that, you're not going to be around long.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, we're ready to jump to a little sports. Yeah, let's hit a little sports. We got a little college football, John. And when I say that, it's really not about football itself. It's far more about what's going on with the NCAA and all these guys jumping from conference to conference to conference. So we had a conference long ago, for anybody old enough to hear about this or understand about this. It was called the Pac-8. There were 8 teams in the Pacific, right? So you had the Pac-8. Well, then you bring in the Arizona schools. All of a sudden, it's the Pac-10. Next thing you know, all right, well, it's the Pac-12. Well, the Pac-12 now has dropped to the Pac-4. All you've got left in the Pac now is Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, and Washington State. The rest have gone somewhere. Well, some of them have already gone to the Big Ten. And the Big Ten is not 10. It's a heck of a lot more than that. And it's getting bigger by the second. They already had USC and UCLA. Now you add Oregon and Washington, 2 great schools, to that whole group. The whole thing is getting kind of crazy, though, John. Now the ACC is all worried about, well, what about Florida State? What are they going to do? And then, of course, you had your school, Colorado's going to the Big 12, where they came from. Utah's going to the Big 12. Arizona and Arizona State going to the Big 12. I mean, this whole thing has really turned upside down and crazy. And you've got these mega conferences with, I'm predicting, John, they're going to be about 20 teams each, give or take, let's just say, and maybe more. But here's the weird thing. You got a Big 10 that you could almost separate these into a Big West and a Big East in the Big 10, right? With 20 schools. Well, then what have we really accomplished? I mean, the whole thing is crazy as hell to me, but it's all about money. All you got to do is follow the money and you're going to find your way along. And the Big Ten's TV contract, and it'll expand a little bit more with all of that. So whether it's football or basketball or whatever sport, John, they have turned this into mega conferences. What do you think? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Cal's even said, you know what? We might get rid of all sports. We might just say the hell with it. We're done. I mean, that's how it's getting to it now at the Pac-4.
Well, that would be really surprising, Pete.
Yeah.
We both know they've got like one of the premier water polo teams. And I'm not saying that jokingly, folks. They've won between rugby and water polo. Cal is one of the powers, over and over again, NCAA champs. Swimming, same thing. It would be surprising to see them drop sports at Cal. I wouldn't be surprised to see Northwestern do it. But Cal, I would be surprised. But like you say, when you're down to what they're down to right now, and you've got a commissioner like this guy, George, I think it's Klyakov, something like that. When you've got this commissioner who's mouthing off about not really worried about losing members to the Big 12, he said it's not a concern. I bet it's more of a concern today than it was when he said that, and that was just a couple days ago.
It's unbelievable, John. It truly is. All right, so we got two more to cover real quick. It's actually one I'm just going to fold the other one in there, but sports gambling. I don't know if you followed this at all because I don't know when this broke, if you were already overseas, but Iowa State, and others are having a real hard time with this. Now, we saw this in the NFL during the offseason as well. We had a lot of players that were betting on the NFL. What a dumb thing that is. How is that something you even need to be told about, let alone being told about it and still doing it? I mean, it's just absolutely as idiotic as you could be, right? Well, these guys now in college, because this is such a gambling and you've got sponsorships of all these different DraftKings and everything else, now you've got Iowa State. The Iowa State starting quarterback, who was pretty daggone good last year, John, 369 bets he made last year. Many of them in football, in college football, and apparently maybe even some involving his own school. So you want to talk about a bad decision, and I can't understand how the coaches and everybody else, because it is a very strict rule in the NCAA. It's players, it's coaches, it's staff. You don't bet. You don't bet college sports. You don't do any of that kind of thing. And unfortunately, we're starting to see that that's become a really big deal. So what do you think about this? And by the way, that quarterback potentially, John, could face 2 years in prison under the wrong circumstances. So I'm hoping for his sake that's not going to be the case, and I'm hoping they can get this cleaned up. But last I heard, he was still yet to check into camp at Iowa State because of all of what's going on.
Yeah, they don't know if he'd be eligible. Allegedly, Pete, from what I heard, this is not from anything but a public source, but the public source said that he'd only bet on games that he didn't participate in. Meaning even if he did bet Iowa State games, he was not playing that week when he bet them. But that's still, like you say, I can't believe that a kid would be taking a chance like that with a career like faces any athlete that's at the Division I level. That means you're one step away from the big show and a big check. So I don't understand why somebody would risk that on relatively minor money that you might be able to make if you're good, but we both know most bettors lose. And in this case, the kids that were betting, and playing rather than just being a student, not a student athlete, are risking an awful lot.
Yeah. Well, talk about risking an awful lot. We'll get to that in just a second. So we'll start off with some of the brawls that are going on, John. So your Chicago Sox, Tim Anderson, he looked the part, man. He looked like, he was coming in. He was going to knock out Ramirez. I mean, he was all but done. He looks all fit and everything. Ramirez is not quite the same body structure at all. Let me tell you, Ramirez, he caught him right in the chin, clean as a whistle, and dropped that son of a gun down onto the plate. It just shows you there is a lot of emotion. These guys actually do care, and they get pretty ticked off out there just like in any other sport. And I was explaining to the guys on my sports radio show on Sunday, John, I said, look, the football players ought to get a class from me. I ought to go around the NFL and show them how you fight. You do not punch the face mask. You're going to just break your hand. Your left hand goes underneath, grabs the face mask, and then you bring up a right undercut right underneath it. That's how you hit a guy when you're on the football field.
I don't know if they want you going around teaching people that.
Yeah, I don't think Goodell wants to hear that. But anyway, so back to the other thing. How about this one, John? And I know you know about it. We've talked about it, and then we'll just hit it real quick. But Zuck versus Musk. I mean, is there anything better? These guys are dead serious. They're not fooling around. They're dead serious that they're going to go at each other, right, in the cage match. Now, if Musk's health is not there, they're obviously going to have to push it out. but I'm not even joking. What would you pay-per-view? You don't need to be at the thing, but for pay-per-view, if the standard pay-per-view is what, 250, $300, 500, I don't know what they really go for these days, but what would you pay to see those two CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the entire world, and these guys want to go at it in a cage match? I mean, is there anything better than that?
No, there isn't. But any board that would let either of those two into a ring, Pete, should be disbanded. That would be the stupidest thing. I mean, is it stupid? Of course it is. But would it be stupid for you as a board member who usually has some sort of respect? In other words, you've done something exceptional to be on the Facebook board, to be on the Tesla board. You're not just some putz, and your reputation on the line, and you're saying, yeah, I think it's a good idea for Musk to get in there, and he's going to kick his butt. What? I think that would be stupid, but I would pay to see it. Let me say this too, Pete. We were out on the boat today, out on the Med, and we went by this huge yacht. There's a lot of them here.
I'm
and
sure.
I looked at it and I said, that's Bezos's chase boat. And a couple people on the boat with me that know boats were saying, I don't think so. And I said, yeah, it is. Look at it. Because it's like, Pete, honestly, it's like 270 or 300-foot yacht. And it's got a helipad and a couple big boats, like 50-foot tenders, that kind of thing. And it's just the boat that follows his sailboat with all the toys and with the helicopter, because he's got the biggest sailboat in the world. You can't land a helicopter on more. I'd say there's probably a couple sailboats that you might be able to, but not his. You can't, because the sails, he's got multiple mast sails. And even if the sails aren't up, but the masts are up there and all those wires and everything, nobody wants to put a helicopter down on that. So when he and Lauren Sanchez come in, they come in on the toy boat, which is only 270 feet, and then they transfer over onto his boat.
God, that's fantastic. Well, the one reason why I'd love to see it happen would be just to watch this thing. And you know what? I'd even say it could go up to like $500, $1,000, and I think they could still sell a lot of viewers to this whole thing. But they did say the money would go to charity. I think they both agreed on that. So, there would be something good coming out of it, outside of the fact that we'd see those two characters in some sort of weird, like little, Bobby the Brain Heenan type kind of outfits on. Would be freaking fantastic.
It would be so classic. And then you'd probably have others. You'd probably have Mark Cuban have to go in the ring with somebody.
Mr. Wonderful.
And you'd have to pick the relatively young guys. I mean, that's one edge that Zuck definitely has over Musk, Pete.
Yep.
Zuck is, I believe, still significantly younger than Elon, but Elon has practiced jujitsu before, allegedly other martial arts and things like that. So it's not just that Zuck has just dived into this and he's really good at it. Elon might be pretty good at it too. But anyway, well, thanks for joining us, folks. We hope you will join us again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you check out marketrebellion.com, and Pete and I will welcome you back tomorrow at 1.